pleasure to be here to talk about this today. I'm going to try and strike a balance between calming things down a little bit when I talk about digital twins and also lighting a little bit of a fire in the same way that Keith has just done, because what we can see coming here is what he's just referred to as a phase shift. Now, we've been building models of our environment to enable us to make decisions about it, to plan and to execute for as long as we've been social animals. We used to call them maps, we've called them models, we've called them war games on occasion, we've called them simulations. So if this is nothing new, what's changing? Well, we've got better and better at informing them. We've collected more and more data. We've built more accurate models of aeroplanes, more accurate models of buildings, more accurate models of the computer systems that we run. And those technologies that have enabled us to build those more and more accurate models have themselves been accelerating. And it's that combination of effects which is important. So when we look at the next trends in our cyber physical infrastructure, what we're concerned with isn't whether any one of those technical changes is coming to bear, but how they all combine together. If we look at just the number of sensors that we're seeing today, I mean, the number of Internet of Things devices, which are a key sensor feeding digital twins in this day and age, will have doubled between 2022 and 2025. The number of Earth-observing satellites over broadly the same period will have increased fivefold. Smartphone use has gone from 50% penetration to 85% penetration just in the last 5 years. So we are seeing an awful lot more access to data, which is giving us a more detailed picture of the environment around us in more and more dimensions than we ever conceived was possible. And none of those was driven specifically to produce a digital twin, but it's all there. When we look at storage, storage itself is something that will have doubled by the end of 2025 from now. So there's more and more data that's being put together and processed than ever before. And although that hasn't been done deliberately with the intention of producing a digital twin, it's relevant to what we're doing today. The smartphone you've got in your pocket outperforms the supercomputers at the turn of the century. And for those of us that are old enough to remember, telephones back then were something else entirely. For those of you that can't, they really weren't very good. So let's not even think about the power of supercomputers themselves today. And I tried to look at some of the figures around the number of sort of pixels you could get in a virtual reality headset now, and I've kind of given up. Now that you can get retina displays inside headsets, it's sort of moot. We can now visualize, we can now interpret, we can now engage data in ways that we couldn't imagine 3, 4, 5 years ago. And these are all separate dimensions of progress. So when you put those together, if each of those is growing on an exponential curve, the combination of them is about to go through a step change, because those curves multiply together and you're going to get a complete phase shift from one thing to another. So these things feel really hard right now. They feel very, very difficult indeed to do, but all of the things that make them hard are changing technically. So the potential for a digital twin, for our model of reality, for the things that we want to assess, things that we want to place scenarios in, all of that's about to change very dramatically. We know what we're doing with this, but we don't know what we're going to be doing with it next year. Now, in the center, we've got a couple of priorities and particular areas in this that we're interested in that I want to prioritize. We've got a lot of experience in building digital twins of engineering systems, be those machines, be those engines, be those factories, and indeed of the environment around us, weather systems, mountains, roads, and so on. But the next step for us, which we think is going to be very, very fruitful for investment, is going to be when we're looking at social digital twins. Now, social digital twins focus on people. Rather than having people as an incidental part of the system, people are what the twin is about. And modeling people is hard. Every single individual is unique. You all behave very differently. You all behave in annoyingly unpredictable ways. And none of you can actually be captured accurately in a mathematical model, which I think is what really makes it very interesting. But at the same time, if you can model the way that people behave in their environment and with the technology that surrounds them, then you can do some pretty amazing things. You can start to model out your policies. You can start to model out your interventions with benefits payments or different tax regimes. If you have a model of an environment in which people are moving around, you can drop an infectious disease in and see how it spreads, and then you can take it back out and close down some parts of it and see what happens and see if it makes a difference. And you can start to simulate and test the things that you're doing and give evidence that the policies you're going to put in place will have the effect that you want. Now, all models are wrong. Some are useful. So we need to get clever at working out where there are limitations on using those models. But if we can start to do that, we can start to inform policy discussions and we can start to make a real difference. And we think some of these simulations that are possible and some of these models that are possible to put together with the technology and the data that's available today will not only be productive in their own right, but they enable you to test those policies that drive and lead to productivity more widely. So social digital twins are an area which are going to have enormous impact on the agenda that we've talked about here today. Those twins themselves, though, are challenging not only because they're a technical challenge to collect the data, they're challenging because of what they represent in terms of a decision-making function. They're going to contain information about people, and that information will be gathered directly because we've collected it as part of something that people know about. I'm going to go to the doctor, I know they've got my medical records. I go to a company to buy a mobile phone, I know that they've got my billing details. But a lot of information is now being put into databases that we don't expect is being collected. Our activities online going into the ad tech sector, and we're starting to see data being collected for one purpose and being transferred and handed over for another. Some of it with legitimate reasons which are being laid out in legislation and regulation, and some of it just through commercial practice. So there's going to be a natural concern about how people are represented in these data sets and what control you have over that representation. There's also going to be concern about who uses that information and makes decisions about you and how you engage with it. Now, where we think these will really make people smarter because of this collection of information is that the more information about more people that is in there, the better the model will be, but the greater the risks that come with it. But the more use of that model by more people, the safer its use will become. So we're quite committed to an open approach to developing digital twins here, where we're looking at open standards, open architectures, open ways of working, open ethics, because if you can open this up and more people are engaged in being part of that twin, they can also be engaged in the policy discussions that are being made about it, and they can be engaged in the use of that information. This leads to properly informed digital democracy. And it's an attempt to, and it's important that we step away from just giving that information to a centralized decision maker who makes decisions in isolation in the dark. Make them in the light with everybody having visibility of the information that's in the twin, and you're really achieving something quite special, I think. And with that in mind, that's something that makes the collective smarter as well as the individuals smarter. So that's collective intelligence where everybody is better off as a result of it. It's not all going to be that easy, though. There are a number of challenges. There are some genuine tensions. I've talked about the tension there about how information is going to be gathered from people, and that is something which is a challenge in its own right. There's also that challenge around the way that privacy and security matches the agency that people have. Keith talked about this earlier on. How free are you to act if others have information about you? Our answer is that you should know that information and you should know how it's being used. But we've got to resolve that tension, and there are some potential changes coming because we're beginning to realize just how much of our digital lives has been captured. We need to converge on standards, but the technical standards are something that we're all fairly experienced in dealing with. When you start to put models together, particularly in the social domain, you're combining information from different data sets that were put together for different purposes that have a different understanding of the things that they're looking at. So you use the same word to talk about different things, and you use different words to talk about the same things, and we like to call that an ontology, which again is a word that you like to use to talk about things. What it really means is I can look at a data set from one domain and I can compare it to another, and they don't make sense, even once I formatted the data. So resolving some of those standards is equally important. And I think one of the key elements that we're going to have to get our heads around with this, and the illustration here is what I call ground rush. December last year, the vast majority of us hadn't heard about large language models. Now they're everywhere. We're worried about them. We're concerned about them. We're trying to decide what to do with them. That's a very, very quick pace of change. But that was a revolution that was being developed for a long time. And there were lots of people that saw it coming and understood that this was the potential. And we were still surprised by it. We think in digital twins there's a similar challenge here. There are a lot of technical changes happening very quickly that will give us the potential to make changes very, very fast. And somebody will do that, and they will be combined. Those data sets will be combined, those technologies will be integrated, and there will be a phase change in what's capable, and we'll still be taken by surprise when it happens. We don't have to be if we want to start to look a little bit ahead. So I'll just recap on that and say digital twins are the next evolution in digitally enabled decision support engines. We've been doing this for years. We've used maps, we've used models, we've used simulations. They're getting better. We think there's a phase change coming because of the combination of technologies. We think that's going to happen in the social as well as the engineering and the mechanical space. And we think it's going to make everybody as a society smarter and more able to engage in the process of the policy decisions that impact them. And we think we need to be ready for that change and start thinking about the implications of it now. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.